History is full of inventions that were supposed to improve life and somehow ended up making it weirder, uglier, or actively more dangerous. We are talking about gadgets, machines, and ideas so unnecessary they feel like practical jokes funded by real money. From babies in cages to cigarettes with umbrellas, here are 32 weird inventions that absolutely did not need to exist. 1. Bad parenting advice has had a strong run through history, but the baby cage from the 1930s deserves a trophy and probably a police interview. Doctors in places like London and New York became obsessed with the idea that children needed fresh air to stay healthy. Nice in theory. Slight problem. A lot of families lived high above the street with no yard, so the genius solution was to bolt a wire cage to the outside of an apartment window and place the child inside it like a tiny human canary. Parents would open the window, slide the kid into this metal basket, and go back to folding laundry while their toddler dangled over a massive drop. It was sold as wholesome and scientific, which is incredible when the entire setup depended on bolts, luck, and blind optimism. Eventually, people noticed that hanging babies over the pavement was maybe not ideal childcare. 2. Before smart homes became a normal way for appliances to judge us, the 1990s gave us the smart toaster, a machine so unnecessary it feels like a dare. This thing could connect to the early internet, grab the weather forecast, and burn a little sun or cloud onto your toast. That sounds futuristic for about 6 seconds, until you remember how internet worked back then. You had to wait through a dial-up connection just to get breakfast graffiti telling you whether it might rain, which the sky was already doing for free. Even better, the heating was inconsistent, so the toast often came out looking less like a forecast and more like a crime scene. Instead of a neat weather icon, you got a blackened slice with a suspicious smudge in the middle. It was one of the first great examples of useless smart technology, proving that putting data on bread does not automatically make breakfast impressive. 3. Modern people hate missing calls, but the shower hood from the 1970s took that anxiety and turned it into a full costume. This invention was basically a plastic helmet that sealed around your head and neck so you could answer the phone while showering. Because clearly the greatest tragedy of the era was not war, inflation, or bad wallpaper, but the possibility of letting a phone ring for 8 minutes. You would stand there under running water, wearing what looked like a cheap space helmet, trying to hold a conversation while shampoo slid toward your ears and somebody on the other end probably wanted to sell you something useless. It turned a normal shower into a weird underwater office meeting. The whole thing feels like a monument to human insecurity, as if being unreachable for one short bath was somehow unacceptable. All that effort just to sound damp, confused, and deeply ridiculous. 4. If background noise destroys your concentration, you might understand why Hugo Gernsback invented the isolator in 1925. But understanding it is not the same as wanting to wear it. This thing looked like a wooden punishment device from a low-budget submarine nightmare. It was a huge helmet made to block sound and limit vision so completely that you could focus only on your work. Your entire world became a tiny slit aimed at the paper in front of you. Since the helmet was basically an airtight box, it also needed an oxygen hose attached to it so the user would not quietly expire while trying to be productive. That detail alone should have ended the experiment immediately. Instead, Gernsback sat around looking like a man trapped inside his own furniture, proving that the line between a productivity tool and medieval torture equipment is thinner than people think. 5. If modern wellness trends seem ridiculous, just remember that the 1920s gave people Radithor, a so-called health tonic made with actual radioactive material. Yes, people drank radiation because it was marketed as energizing and modern. The slogan basically promised to revive the human equivalent of a half-dead zombie, which should have been a clue. The most infamous believer was wealthy industrialist Eben Byers, who consumed around 1,400 bottles of the stuff because he thought it made him feel stronger. It did not. The radiation slowly wrecked him from the inside, his teeth began falling out, and his jaw eventually deteriorated so badly it came apart. He died in a state so horrifying it sounds invented, and his body remained radioactive enough to require burial in a lead-lined coffin. The whole saga remains one of history's clearest examples of confidence outrunning common sense at terrifying speed. 6. Japan has produced brilliant inventions, but the subway sleeper helmet belongs in the opposite museum. Usually grouped with chindogu, the glorious art of solving tiny problems with maximum embarrassment, this thing was designed for exhausted commuters who kept nodding off on trains. The concept was simple and humiliating. A helmet with a giant suction cup on the back so you could stick your head to the window and avoid collapsing onto the stranger next to you. In theory, it prevented awkward, shoulder-drooling incidents. In reality, it made you look like you lost a fight with a bathroom plunger. And if the train stopped suddenly, the suction might stay put while your neck lurched forward, like your skeleton was filing a complaint. So yes, maybe it kept you upright, but at the low cost of public dignity and possible whiplash. A true masterpiece of problem-solving nobody asked for. 7. In 1956, Chrysler looked at the open road and decided what drivers really needed was a record player inside the car. Thus arrived the Highway Hi-Fi, a gadget that sounded luxurious until reality hit the first pothole. On paper, it was brilliant. Cruising along while your favorite music played from a turntable mounted under the dashboard. In practice, record players and roads are natural enemies. A vinyl record depends on a tiny needle staying delicately in place. Roads depend on being full of bumps, gravel, cracks, and the occasional insult. Chrysler tried to solve the problem with a special heavy-pressure arm, but physics was not interested. The smallest vibration could send the needle skating across the record and permanently damage both the music and your patience. To make it even worse, the system only played special Chrysler-approved discs, meaning your soundtrack was limited by corporate taste. It was elegant engineering ruined by the scandalous existence of real roads. 8. In 1939, Charles Steinlauf unveiled the Goofy bike, and honestly, the name was still too gentle. This four-wheeled family contraption was meant to turn a casual outing into a rolling circus of terrible decisions. Dad sat up top steering the machine, the son perched near the handlebars, and Mom was placed in the middle at an actual sewing machine. Not riding, not relaxing, sewing. The idea was apparently that even during a family trip, she should still be fixing trousers while bouncing down the street, because heaven forbid a woman enjoy a Sunday without hemming socks on moving equipment. It ignored every practical issue imaginable, including vibration, balance, and the fact that sewing requires precision and not being launched over cobblestones. The whole thing now survives as a perfect blend of absurd engineering and outdated social expectations, like somebody tried to combine family bonding with unpaid labor and called it innovation. 9. Before noise-canceling headphones rescued society from public audio chaos, the 1980s tried something far worse: the stereo vest. This was a puffy, wearable sound system with speakers built into the shoulders, because apparently the goal was not listening to music but forcing an entire bus stop into your playlist. The marketing sold it as immersive, personal sound. Personal for whom exactly remained unclear, since everyone nearby got dragged into the experience whether they wanted to or not. The wearer stomped around loaded with bulky batteries, cheap plastic components, and enough self-confidence to ignore every dirty look in a 3-block radius. Visually, it was a disaster, like a rejected costume from a bargain bin robot movie. Socially, it was even worse. You were not a music lover. You were a moving public disturbance wrapped in polyester. It was portable narcissism with shoulder speakers, and somehow people thought this was the future. 10. In 1961, Goodyear decided ordinary tires were too boring and introduced the Neothane tire, a glowing translucent wheel that made your car look like it belonged in a jukebox-powered science fiction film. Inside these futuristic tires were light bulbs, which meant you could literally drive around on illuminated wheels and even match their color to your car or outfit if you were feeling especially committed to spectacle. And to be fair, visually they were incredible. Mechanically, though, they were a disaster wearing makeup. The synthetic material could not handle real driving conditions and had an unfortunate tendency to turn soft or even gooey under heat and stress. Meanwhile, the bulbs inside could shatter on impact, because of course they could. They were expensive, impractical, and probably a fantastic way to blind other drivers at night. For one brief moment, the future looked dazzling. Then, it melted onto the road and reminded everyone why normal tires are black and boring. 11. In 1960, somebody in the movie business decided that sight and sound were no longer enough, and audiences needed to smell films too. That decision gave us smell-o-vision, a glorious disaster that piped synthetic odors through little tubes to individual seats. The launch was meant to be revolutionary. Instead, it turned the cinema into a confused chemical ambush. Every time the machine released a scent, it made enough noise to interfere with the dialogue, which is not ideal when your fancy innovation keeps interrupting the movie. It is supposed to improve. Even better, the smells lingered too long, so scenes changed faster than the air did. 1 minute the screen showed flowers, the next it showed garbage, and the audience was stuck inhaling a disgusting floral trash cocktail. Rather than making movies immersive, it made them mildly nauseating. The whole experiment taught a simple lesson. Just because a film has a garbage scene does not mean the theater needs to smell like one. 12. In 1948, one inventor looked at a hot bowl of soup and decided the real problem was not the soup, but the outrageous burden of blowing on it. His answer was the mechanical soup spoon, which sounds like satire but was absolutely real. It was a spoon fitted with a tiny battery-powered fan on the handle, designed to cool each mouthful as you lifted it towards your face. The idea was elegant only if you had never actually eaten soup before. In real life, you now had to maneuver a heavier, vibrating utensil with a miniature propeller attached to it. Instead of cooling your food with grace, the fan could easily blow broth sideways, fog your glasses, or create a direct soup attack on your own eyes. If you had facial hair, even better, because now lunch came with the risk of accidental grooming by rotating blades. It was a wildly over-engineered fix for a problem that normal human patients had already solved centuries earlier. 13. Cyclists love speed, but the prone bicycle took that obsession and transformed it into a personal injury lawsuit waiting to happen. Instead of sitting upright like a sensible mammal, the rider lay flat on their stomach with their face hovering alarmingly close to the front wheel. Yes, this reduced wind resistance. It also made the rider look like they were trying to become a missile. The big issue was obvious to anyone with a forehead. If you hit a pothole, curb, loose rock, or unlucky squirrel, you were no longer falling off a bike. You were being launched headfirst into the road like a human dart. Visibility was also terrible because seeing ahead meant constantly craning your neck upward at an angle your spine did not appreciate. After a short ride, your back was angry, your neck was bargaining, and your face was one bad bump away from leading the entire journey. Faster, maybe. Smarter, absolutely not. 14. During the Cold War, people were so terrified of nuclear war that inventors started offering survival ideas with the confidence of magicians and the usefulness of kitchen foil. One especially hopeful design suggested civilians wear reflective suits made from shiny material so the surface could bounce away the thermal flash of an atomic blast. In other words, dress like a baked potato and trust science to sort the rest out. The theory sounded comforting if you ignored literally everything else a nuclear bomb does. A reflective suit might help with heat in the same way an umbrella helps during a meteor strike. It did absolutely nothing about the blast wave, collapsing buildings, fires, or radiation. So if disaster came, you would not be safe. You would simply be the most neatly wrapped casualty in the neighborhood. These suits were less survival gear and more emotional support costumes for a world living under constant atomic anxiety. 15. Extreme wealth has always produced incredible luxury and truly disgusting nonsense, and one custom Rolls-Royce from 1954 sits proudly in the second category. An eccentric American businessman ordered a version of the car with a fully working toilet built into the rear seat. Yes, the back seat. Lift the cushion, and there it was. A private throne inside an already absurdly expensive vehicle. At first, that sounds like peak luxury for someone who never wanted to stop moving. Then comes the detail that ruins your faith in civilization. The system had no septic tank. None. Waste was simply released onto the road behind the car like some high-class biological weapon. So imagine admiring a beautiful Rolls-Royce from behind, appreciating the craftsmanship, only for it to repay your admiration with airborne human disaster. It is one of history's purest examples of money removing inconvenience while also removing every remaining trace of shame. 16. Japan gave the world brilliant ideas like the Walkman and the PlayStation, but it also gave us chindogu, the noble tradition of inventions that technically solve a problem while ruining your dignity. One of the greatest examples is the noodle splash guard. Ramen can absolutely splatter broth onto your hair or clothes if you attack it with enough enthusiasm, so someone created a plastic shield that fits around your face like a lion's mane crossed with a veterinary cone. In theory, it protects you from soup splash. In practice, it makes you look like a deeply unstable sunflower eating lunch under supervision. You sit there slurping noodles while wearing a bizarre face halo, supposedly proud that your hair remains untouched. Meanwhile, everyone else in the restaurant is wondering if they accidentally walked into a science experiment. It solves a tiny inconvenience by replacing it with full public humiliation, which is honestly the most chindogu outcome possible. 17. People complain about heavy virtual reality gear now, but the 1960s were out there strapping miniature televisions directly onto human faces like anatomy was just a suggestion. Early TV glasses were meant to deliver personal viewing in a futuristic, private way. What they actually delivered was eye strain, neck pain, and the visual elegance of a man being attacked by electronics. These devices used tiny cathode ray tube screens mounted near the eyes, which made the headset bulky, awkward, and absurdly heavy. Some versions even stuck antennas out of the top like confused insect legs. To use them comfortably, and by comfortably I mean without immediate regret, you basically had to sit still and accept that your nose bridge was now supporting an argument with gravity. The image quality was often fuzzy, alignment could be poor, and headaches came free of charge. It was the future, according to people who had apparently never met a human skull. 18. In the 1930s, beauty standards were so relentless that someone convinced women they could manufacture dimples through pain and determination. Enter the dimple maker, patented in 1936 by Isabella Gilbert, a device that looked less like a beauty aid and more like a medieval apology for being born with normal cheeks. It was a spring-loaded clamp fitted to the face with two knobs pressing hard into the cheeks, supposedly training the flesh into permanent dimples if worn long enough. The instructions even suggested wearing it for extended periods, which tells you exactly how much the era enjoyed suffering in the name of appearance. In reality, it did not create charming dimples so much as soreness, pressure, and the possibility of real damage. It was the beauty industry in one perfect object. Take insecurity, add metal, call it glamour. Thousands bought the promise that pain could sculpt personality into their cheeks. 19. Humans have always wanted to walk on water, and the 1960s tried to make that dream happen with water walking shoes. The idea sounds whimsical until you realize it basically meant strapping two tiny boats to your feet and hoping your body would figure out the rest. Each foot got its own little pontoon, and you used poles for balance like some desperate lake-born stilt walker. Advertisements made it look effortless, with cheerful people gliding across water like they had cracked the laws of nature. Reality was much meaner. The second your legs drifted apart even slightly, your lower body was dragged toward a deeply unwanted split, while your dignity dissolved in front of onlookers. Steering was awkward, balance was exhausting, and most attempts ended with users flailing into the water upside down. It turns out there is a reason boats are designed as one object and not as two chaotic slippers. 20. The Victorian era loved medicine with drama, and the electric bath was one of its most alarming hits. The sales pitch was magnificent nonsense. If you were tired, sore, sluggish, or generally existing in an unsatisfactory way, maybe what you needed was to sit in a warm bath while electricity passed through the water around you. Patients would settle into the tub, electrodes would be lowered in, and doctors would assure them that the prickling sensation meant healing was underway. More accurately, it meant your nervous system was filing an urgent complaint. This was marketed as a cure for everything from rheumatism to laziness, which is the sort of medical confidence only possible before regulations and basic caution. Instead of exercise, rest, or actual treatment, people got what was essentially a controlled soaking electrocution sold as wellness. Victorians really looked at water and electricity, two things that should not mingle, and said yes, but what if therapy? 21. Some inventions sound impressive until you picture yourself actually using them, and the car exhaust grill is one of the worst offenders. Introduced in the 1960s, this gadget clipped onto a car's tailpipe so you could supposedly cook food using the heat produced while driving. Waste not, want not, apparently. The idea was marketed as efficient and clever, like turning your road trip into a barbecue with extra engineering. But the reality was a greasy little tragedy waiting behind the vehicle. The inventors insisted the exhaust fumes would not touch the food, which is technically reassuring in the same way being told the poison is nearby, but not directly on your sandwich is reassuring. Even if contamination was limited, you were still cooking meat inches from soot, dust, road grime, and the general chaos of traffic. It was a snack system that combined driving, fumes, and digestive optimism in ways nobody should ever have approved. 22. In 1963, John H.T. Rinfret patented the anti-bandit bag, a briefcase designed around a very specific philosophy. If a thief tries to steal your stuff, everyone loses. The mechanism was spectacularly petty. If someone grabbed the bag, the owner could pull the handle trigger and the bottom would drop open, instantly dumping the contents across the pavement. Money, papers, lunch, dignity, all of it scattered in every direction like a stress explosion with hinges. The theory was that the mugger would be slowed down or confused while chasing loose items. In real life, you were just turning a robbery into a windy treasure hunt. The thief could still grab things, nearby strangers could join in, and your paperwork might be halfway to the gutter before you finish screaming. It was mutual destruction disguised as self-defense, a briefcase that protected nothing except the inventor's commitment to pure spite. 23. In mid-19th century London, fear of street crime became so intense that even neckwear started preparing for combat. During the garroting panic of the 1860s, many people became convinced that attackers were lurking behind every corner, ready to strangle respectable citizens from behind. Naturally, fashion responded the only way fashion ever does, by becoming ridiculous. The anti-garroting cravat looked like a refined gentleman's accessory, but hidden beneath the fabric were metal spikes or rigid plates designed to punish anyone who grabbed your throat. It was elegant from a distance and mildly insane up close. If an attacker reached for your neck, they got a handful of steel cactus. Effective, perhaps, but comfort clearly died in the planning phase. Turning your head became difficult, your collar felt like armor, and dinner parties probably involved a lot of stiff robotic nodding. It was formal wear infused with panic, because nothing says urban sophistication like dressing your throat for battle. 24. In 1882, James Williams looked at the ordinary mousetrap and decided the real issue was that it did not involve enough firearm discharge. His solution was the revolver mousetrap, a device that turned pest control into a tiny domestic war zone. It worked by aiming a loaded pistol at the bait and triggering the gun when a mouse stepped onto the plate. That was the plan. Not catch the mouse, not trap the mouse. Shoot at the mouse inside your home. This was presented as clever rather than completely deranged. The obvious flaw, apart from every single part of it, was that firing a high-caliber weapon in your kitchen is not ideal for sleep, property, pets, or toes. Imagine being jolted awake in the middle of the night by a gunshot, then discovering a wrecked floorboard, a traumatized cat, and no guarantee the mouse was even there. It was pest control by way of spectacular overreaction. 25. By the mid-20th century, the war against baldness had become so desperate that some men decided the answer was not acceptance, hats, or dignity, but aerosol deception. Spray-on hair arrived through infomercials promising a quick fix for thinning patches, and what it really delivered was scalp paint with delusions of grandeur. The product coated the head in a dark mist that was supposed to create the illusion of fuller hair. Instead, it often produced a flat, artificial finish somewhere between shoe polish and industrial primer. Under studio lights, it might look passable if nobody blinked too hard. In real life, rain, sweat, humidity, or basic human panic could send the color running down your forehead like your hairline was melting under pressure. The whole thing was sad, funny, and deeply committed to denial. It remains a perfect monument to the lengths people will go before admitting that maybe the forehead has simply expanded. 26. Shoe umbrellas are one of those inventions that instantly tell you the designer had too much time and not enough embarrassment. These tiny clip-on umbrellas attach to the front of your shoes to protect them from rain, because apparently regular umbrellas were doing a lazy job by only covering the human being. In theory, they keep the toes of fancy shoes dry. In practice, they protect about 10% of the problem while making you walk like a malfunctioning puppet. The sides of your shoes still get wet. The heels still get wet. Your socks are still negotiating with the weather, and your ankles are abandoned entirely. To avoid tripping over the little canopies, you have to take exaggerated, careful steps like a cartoon burglar, sneaking across a wet floor. So yes, the leather might survive a drizzle. Unfortunately, your reputation will not. It is an accessory built on the belief that preserving footwear is worth sacrificing dignity. 27. During World War II, the Nazis produced plenty of dangerous ideas, and one of the strangest was the Krumlauf, a curved rifle attachment designed to let soldiers shoot around corners. It sounds like something a bored teenager would sketch after too many action films, but it was very real. The logic was simple. If the barrel bends, the bullet can turn without the shooter exposing themselves. Unfortunately, bullets are not cooperative little commuters. They move at enormous speed, and asking them to take a sharp turn inside a metal tube led to exactly the kind of chaos you would expect. The projectile could fragment, the barrel wore out quickly, accuracy was awful, and the recoil could become wildly unpredictable. So, instead of creating a revolutionary tactical advantage, the device mostly proved that physics remains extremely stubborn during warfare. It was basically video game logic dragged into reality, where it immediately face-planted. 28. In the 1950s, smoking culture reached a level of absurd confidence that now feels like parody. And one of its finest monuments was a holder designed to let you smoke an entire pack at once. Not eventually. At once. Magazine models posed with this plastic contraption as if it were glamorous, when in reality, it looked like a bouquet of bad decisions with 20 lit cigarettes sticking out of it. The idea was that modern life moved too fast for one cigarette at a time, so why not accelerate the self-destruction process like an efficiency expert with no survival instinct? Using it would have required the lung capacity of a steam engine and the judgment of a cartoon villain. It looked less like a luxury accessory and more like a prop built for someone trying to break a world record in terrible choices. Even as a novelty, it perfectly captured an era that treated nicotine like a productivity tool. 29. In 1963, Japanese inventors decided that real cats were too unpredictable for rat control, so they built a fake one instead. The result was a motorized device shaped vaguely like a cat's head, complete with glowing eyes and a recorded meow played exactly 10 times every minute. The theory was that rats would hear the sound, see the eerie eyes, and flee in terror from their artificial feline overlord. The problem is that rats are not stupid enough to stay fooled by a battery-powered box forever. After a while, they noticed that the machine never pounced, never moved with purpose, and mostly just repeated itself like a haunted toy with commitment issues. So the rats adapted. The fake cat became background furniture while the humans got stuck listening to the same mechanical meow on loop. It was technology reinventing something nature already solved, only louder and with worse batteries. 30. Victorian medicine was full of spectacularly bad ideas, but the tapeworm trap may be the one that makes the stomach surrender immediately. Instead of relying on diet, medicine, or anything remotely sensible, this device aimed to remove a tapeworm by luring it into a baited metal cylinder. That cylinder had to be swallowed. Naturally, it was attached to a string, and naturally, the user had to leave that string hanging out of their mouth while waiting. So there you sat, gagging politely with a cord trailing from your lips, hoping the parasite in your stomach would smell the bait, crawl into the tube, and let itself be reeled in like some revolting internal fish. Once you felt movement, the plan was to pull the whole setup back up through your throat. Unsurprisingly, this was not just horrifying but dangerous, often causing injury and bleeding, instead of delivering the clean little victory its inventors imagined. 31. Smoking addiction inspired many ridiculous accessories, but the cigarette umbrella from the 1950s deserves a special round of sarcastic applause. This tiny umbrella clipped onto a cigarette holder and existed for one noble purpose: making sure your cigarette stayed dry in the rain. Not you. The cigarette. While a normal person might step under shelter, postpone the smoke, or accept the weather like an adult, this gadget assumed the user was willing to stand outside in a downpour protecting a single burning cigarette like it was royalty. Visually, it was hilarious. A miniature little canopy perched above the tobacco while the person underneath got soaked from head to toe. It captured a truly magnificent set of priorities, where a few cents worth of nicotine required better rain protection than the lungs and body consuming it. Charming, absurd, and impossible to defend, it remains one of the funniest symbols of misplaced devotion ever designed. 32. Before radiation became widely understood as a terrible idea for casual retail use, shoe stores in the 1950s proudly offered children the chance to get their feet X-rayed for fashion. The shoe-fitting fluoroscope was a wooden machine with an X-ray tube at the bottom. Kids would stick their feet inside while parents and salesmen peered through viewing ports to admire the glowing bones of the child's toes inside the shoes. It was presented as modern, scientific, and reassuring, which sounds wonderful until you remember that everyone involved was being exposed to radiation for the sake of checking whether loafers pinched a little. The machines were often poorly regulated and could leak radiation far beyond what anyone considered safe later on. So a child could leave the shop with shoes that fit beautifully and a dose of something far less helpful. It was retail technology at its most cheerful and most horrifying. So after all that, one question matters. Which of these inventions is the single dumbest thing humans ever seriously built? And what gloriously useless monstrosity did we miss that deserved a spot on this list? Drop it in the comments and defend your choice like your reputation depends on it. And if you enjoy history at its most absurd, hit like, subscribe, and stick around for more brilliant disasters from the past.